the thing that was tricky about the third quarter is that the groups that we saw as leadership at the beginning of the quarter emerged from the quarter not being the leaders anymore, Erin. So I guess, do you believe in that sort of momentum into the value stocks, away from the growth stocks going into fourth quarter?
So I don't. I actually think that you should stick with the winners that have worked well over the past year. I think that the market is in some ways positioned a little bit longer, certainly than we were coming out of August. You've seen not only, flows going into equities, the CTAs and the systematic guys are more positioned, but also you've seen, I think, a lot of, sort of the value sector start to outperform and people to cover some of those shorts. And so I'm concerned right now going into what hasn't been a great earnings pre-announcement season into third quarter earnings. In addition to that, you still have uncertainty with respect to trade and additional uncertainty with respect to the impeachment and potentially, the Republican nominees have been changing a lot and very much in flux. I think that puts the value names, particularly ones that are really in the crosshairs of the Democratic agenda, at risk, which is why I'm continuing to stay in what's worked this year. I still like the tech sector. Even though it's off 4% from its highs, it's certainly underperformed over the last couple of weeks. I think that if you're going to place your bets into year end, stick with these secular growth stories and stick with the tech sector.
At the risk of being a Debbie Downer, I'll play
Let's
the role.
Not be a downer,
I'll
Mel.
play
It's
the
a
role
great
for
day.
Monday. I'll play the role for Monday, but it feels a little bit like a year ago. We started getting some notable earnings out. I mean, that were very disappointing. A FedEx, a Micron, a Carnival, and you start thinking, are things starting to hit the consumer, or are companies actually starting to see the impact of the trade war? And then we went into a earnings season, which saw some very negative earnings and forecasts taken down, and then we saw, what did we see in the stock market?
And yet, here we are. We're pushing towards the 52-week highs on just about everything, every one of the indices that we're looking at right now. And we've got a very low VIX. I mean, Joe talks about diversification. Completely agree with Joe on that. I think I've got a really diversified portfolio right now, Mel, not just in stocks, but also in the option positions that I have. And I think the fact that if you do that along with some hedging, and when I say hedging, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, you buy puts to the downside. Maybe you do. If your exposure is the S&P 500, then I think you do. If your exposure is a little bit more diverse than that, I tell you, and one of the reasons, there's a lot of different reasons, the dollar and everything else, but why has gold and silver had this great run from May? Now, obviously, they've pulled back. Why are they pulling back? Because September was pretty daggone good. August was not so great in the markets, but September has turned out to be pretty good. And I think you can get more and more exposure slowly into the financials. I know Joe bought Wells Fargo the other day. I bought Wells Fargo the other day. I like the new CEO. That's something we've all been waiting for is, hey, look, when are you going to ever appoint a CEO to this company? They finally did it. And because of that, we had some option activity as well. I bought the stock, and actually I'll be turning this into a buy right, along with taking in that dividend yield every single quarter.
Miss Erin's shaking her head at you.
Which part?
I'm really
Tisk,
concerned
tisk.
about buying the financials right here. Elizabeth Warren, one of her number one goals is going to go after big banks. And I think that increasingly, as we go into early 2020, the Democratic agenda and the potential for it is going to be front and center for markets.
Agree with you 1,000%. That gives you a little take of where I think Elizabeth Warren is in terms of a candidate, however, because I don't see that. I think if you're right, you got to stay out of healthcare. You've got to stay out of all kinds of different sectors, obviously, based upon everything we've heard so far. So, yes, I totally agree with you. I would stay out if I actually thought that was something that I'd need to be overly concerned about. As of right now,
well, the markets are certainly not pricing in Elizabeth Warren anything at this point.
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't.